In this tutorial, we're going to be sending data from the server to the client. Until now, we've always been sending data from the client to the server, but now we're going to do the opposite. The code on both places will be very similar. So before we start to write anything on the client side, let's go and check our server code. We want to have onMessage received on the client as well, but before that let's clean it up a bit. There is something we're seeing here that we're using multiple times, which is DarkRift reader. And because of that, because we're going to be using always DarkRift reader inside our cases, we can just copy it or just move it outside of the switch statement. So every time we have a switch case, we already know that our reader is set outside. Now, when we have this part of the code, we can just copy the whole method, which is the message received method, and go to our client side. Now just paste it here. We can delete our cases because we're going to be using different ones. And inside we can just add our DarkRift client. You can do it by just going over this highlight message and just click on the bulb and using DarkRift client, or just type it yourself. Now, if we check the server code, we can see that we have message receive event on the client connected. We have something similar on the client side because we have Unity client here. We can access the same onMessage receive event from it. But this time we're going to be using public void awake. So on awake, we're going to be calling client.messageReceive and calling our method. Now the same thing we're going to be doing on destroy, but we're going to be removing the method from it. So now we have something similar to the backend, to our server. Now every time we are connected, this can be executed. If something is sent from the server, we're going to be receiving it here. What we want to do next is just to test our receiver. We can create a new scene here and let's call it lobby. Go inside the lobby, go to file, built-in, let's add it to our scenes. Now let's go back to our login. Something that we'll be using on every scene is the networking manager. The networking manager will contain all our events and it will receive everything that we're sending from the server. So it must be shared between every scene. We can do this easily by just going to our networking manager script, and in the awake method, we can just type don't destroy on load and then say this game object. So this way we're just saying that every time we are changing scenes, we are going to be keeping this object alive. Now, what we want to do next is when we click the login button and we send the information to the server, instead of just directly switching the scenes, we would like to get some message from the server and then switch the scenes. Because if you have, for example, your login with username, password, or any kind of authentication, and you want to check if the user has provided correct identification, you can check it on the server and then return a success message to the client and say, hey, you've logged successfully, and then we can just move him to the other scene only when he is successful. So what we can do is go to our tags, and here we can just type a new tag, user login successful equals maybe 2 and save it. Let's also build our solution. And when we go to our switch case, let's just type case, use short tags.tag and user login successful. Now, again, we know we're not getting the successful message here because we need to restart our OmniSharp. Now when it's restarted, we can see it's here. This will occur very often, so don't get confused about it. Now when we receive the successful message, let's just say scene manager.load scene and type lobby, because lobby is the name of our scene. Again, when we go here to the light bulb, we can just click on using and it will provide our scene manager. Now what is left to do is we can go back to our multiplayer code, and the last part is just when we receive our data, our login data, we just can send back the successful message to the client. We'll be doing it the same way. We can just create a new class here, which will be user login successful. And actually we're not going to provide anything, but in your case you might want to give back some data to the user. For example, if he logs in, you want to give back to him his username, age, or whatever it is. But in our case, we're not going to do that. It will be just empty. Let's copy from our code some of the methods we've already created, so we don't have to write it again. And we can actually create a new method just to be more clear, the code to be more clear, and type on user login successful. Change this to login successful. And pass it to the message. Also, we need to change this to login successful. Now, what we can see here is that we have a client that we do have in our Unity client side, which is Unity client, but in the server we don't have it currently. So what we're going to provide here is our iClient, and we'll call it client. So what we do now is just let's take this, paste it inside our user login, and inside we can provide the client with e.client. Of course, you will have here checks if the password is correct and the identification of the user is correct, but we don't have this. We just want to send a simple message just back to the user and say, hey, everything is fine, you're logged in. Now let's build. Now just to see that everything is working, we can always debug, just log a message, and we can type user login successful here, just so we know that our code went from here. Now let's open our server and the Unity. Click on play, type our name, and click login. Now we can see user login successful. So what happened is we send our message to the server, and the server returned a message to the client, and it changed the scene and it outputted our log, the user login successful. Well, that was it. Thank you for watching. If you've liked the tutorial, please leave a like and subscribe for more.